afternoon, everyone. Who said good morning? Did you say? Happy Tuesday and a very happy fall. A very happy fall. I hope that most of you, if not all of you, have taken some time to be outdoors or do whatever fuels you. And Mr. Tuttle had a little refueling this weekend. He'd like to talk about his 8-point buck, but we don't have time, so you can send pictures around. Not a whopper, but he's a good one. So I certainly hope folks are taking the time to get outdoors and make sure you're refilling those batteries. Speaking of which, refill in time for this coming weekend. I was delighted to hear that this coming weekend sounds a little better than these past couple of days. For any of us sitting out choosing not to sit out on the stand on Monday, very wise decision in my estimation, but it looks like the temperatures will be just a little bit better, hopefully this weekend, but please continue to dress warmly and enjoy time with colleagues and enjoy that time with hunters as they bring their deer in. I'll have opportunity to take Commissioner McHenry around to the North Branch. Aaron will be more in the East Branch with Commissioner Harrison, I think, in part. Mike in the South Branch. Jennifer at her regular station in Herculaneum. Team Herky. But anyway, look forward to seeing folks out in the field this coming weekend. We've got a great agenda today, and we are just delighted to have Miss Karen Harrington here, who is the field supervisor for the Ecological Services Office of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And I had asked Karen quite some time ago, as significant partners for the agencies, to be a guest speaker at one of our upcoming all-staff WebExes, just so folks who know the work that the Ecological Services Office does for us can be reassured that we're continuing to do great work, and certainly under Karen's leadership that we're doing that. But I'm guessing, Karen, there's going to be a lot of our folks who are not aware of everything that Ecological Services does, and we've got a lot of folks online. So we're just delighted to have you share a little bit as a key partner for us what's going on up there in the Columbia office. And so we're going to start out with a presentation by Karen, who has now been in the position almost 3 years as the field supervisor. So without further ado, Ms. Karen Harrington, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Do I have to do anything, or do you do all the magic?
No.
Click? Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Or use the clicker right there.
This clickers are dangerous with me. I'm really excited to be here today to talk about our office and the great work that we're doing with MDC and other partners. And I really appreciate Sarah asking me to come and talk and share, to give me the opportunity to talk to you today. Our relationship with MDC is really important to me. The Fish and Wildlife Service can't be successful at all without you and the great work that you do. I think MDC probably accomplishes more for conservation in a day or a month than the Fish and Wildlife Service in Missouri can get done in a year. Not that we don't do great stuff, but the breadth and just the depth of your expertise is very much appreciated. So that's why I'm excited to talk today. And one of the things that's really important to me is sharing and coordinating. So getting to hear the big picture from each other's perspectives, I think, is really important to keep us moving in the right direction together. So I'm in that vein. I'm going to give a short overview of what the Missouri Ecological Services Field Office does. Kind of touch on some of our priorities. I don't have a ton of time to talk about all of them, so I'll keep it as focused as I can. And I'm going to highlight a few examples of projects that we've got going on together, and talk about some future opportunities and hopefully hear from you on some future opportunities. So my hope today is that you hear something new, or you understand something a little differently than you knew about our office before, or that I plant a little seed for an idea that can stimulate more and better coordination in the future. And that's great for us both to accomplish our mission. So, is it working? It's kind of cobbled together from various pictures, but these 16 folks are the wonderful people that make up the Missouri Ecological Services Field Office. There's 16 counting me, so the 15 wonderful folks. Ecological Services, as you all probably know, is a division, so we're a silo within the Fish and Wildlife Service. Other programs that you, I know, work with and are familiar with is refuges, we've got fisheries, we have the Partners for Fish and Wildlife program, which is very similar to your private lands program. Wildlife and Sport Fish, I'm assuming all of you know them because they administer the grant programs. Migratory bird program and law enforcement. And there's also a science applications presence in Missouri as well. So I'm not going to focus on all of that breadth or I won't get done. So we'll keep it with Ecological Services. Ecological Services does 3 major categories of work. The first one is administering the Endangered Species Act. So our primary way we do that is species recovery, species listing, so evaluating status of species for listing and rulemaking. And we also focus on consultation for a variety of projects that are going on that could harm threatened and endangered species, both private and federal projects. I'm just going to highlight recovery priorities in the state today, but our priorities for listing are pretty easy to understand because if you're interested in what they are, you can go to our national work plan, National Listing Work Plan, and you can see the species through 2024 that we'll be evaluating for listing. So it's a handy little tool that helps hopefully proactive conservation. But there's 23 species in Missouri that are going to be evaluated for listing in the next, 5 years? And so we work on species status assessments when we make those listing determinations, and we do that in partnership with the states. So MDC has been involved in the several that we've had going on recently on crayfish and hellbenders, and hopefully surrounding Ecological Services field offices are coordinating with MDC as well. Consultation, what we do there is with our federal agency partners, again, that's the things, projects that are going on in the landscape. These are the things you do to avoid and minimize impacts to endangered species. So primarily for federal agencies, we're doing consultation with the Corps, and also the Forest Service is a big consultation workload in the state, and federal highways and MoDOT projects. That's probably where we spend the bulk of our time, but we do that kind of conservation activities with all the federal agencies in the state, but those 3 are our primary drivers. For non-federal projects, wind is a really big priority for us right now. Wind is, it's always been an issue and threat, but it seems to be this up and coming threat in Missouri. I think in the past 2.5 years, we've had maybe 15 different wind developers come in and talk to us about impacts to bats and migratory birds. So there's some development pressure that's happening in Missouri for that right now. So we work closely with MDC staff, policy, and both bat and migratory bird biologists to get through those wind sighting and conservation questions. We also are working closely with MDC on the Missouri Bat Habitat Conservation Plan. I see a lot of heads shaking. I know that it's a big and sometimes painful process to get through. So I'm I'm here to say that we'll get to the end of it, and hopefully we'll get to the end of it soon, maybe this summer. But we appreciate you hanging in there to get that big project over the finish line. The second bullet is what we do with environmental contaminants. So in this state, our environmental contaminants program almost fully focuses on natural resource damage and assessment and restoration. That program, which is associated with the lead and heavy metal mining in southeast and southwest Missouri. So I'll go into more detail on that. The last bullet is how we work with federal agencies on their large projects that impact fish and wildlife resources. So some examples of that, I'm going too fast. Some examples of that recently would be working with MDC and DNR and the Corps on the Grand River feasibility study. We also work closely on FERC hydropower projects. So right now we're working with several people in the room on Tunnel Dam and Lake Niangua relicensing. And we're reviewing a variety of new reservoirs in the state that I know you all have interest in as well. That's kind of what we do under that third bullet. We typically try to focus on projects that impact endangered species, but it extends to all fish and wildlife resources for that third bullet. So I'll focus a little bit on endangered species recovery priorities. Right now, this will make some laugh possibly. Our biggest priority right now is to prioritize. We're all spread a little thin, like butter over too much bread. There's 41, I think, federally listed species in Missouri, and I showed you the staff that we have, and we do most of our work through partnerships with MDC and other groups, but it's just, there's not enough time and resources. So what we're trying to do is identify a few species, a few priority species, and a few priority geographies. Sounds familiar, huh? So the priority geographies and species we think is like a great place where we can work together and we can take advantage of the great work you've already done in that vein. We're not done with this effort. It's just started really in the last year. But again, it fits in nicely with the strategic planning that you all are doing. And we did start discussions on how to do priority species together. And in this past annual Recovery Leads meeting that Kelly Rezak sets up. So we've got those discussions started, and hopefully they continue and we can focus our work a little better and get some high priority actions done. That's the goal, is to get some actions done. So the species that we'll select as focal species will either be those that are close to recovery, so maybe we can do a couple things and get them off the list, or those that are close to extinction, so we can do a couple really important recovery actions and prevent extinction. The kind of recovery actions that we do typically fit into 3 different lanes. So this first one is species propagation and reintroduction. So there's a lot of great work going on with MDC in these arenas, led by MDC in these arenas. So just a few species to highlight that are up there. It's hard to see, but we've got American burying beetle reintroductions, and the last I heard, those are going quite well. The beetles are increasing, and they're in 2 new MDC conservation areas outside of the reintroduction site. I believe we stopped augmenting those populations last year and see how they're doing. I don't know the results of that yet. Hopefully somebody that's listening does. So that's going well. Topeka Shiner, we also have a reintroduction program for Topeka Shiners that we work closely together on. That first experimental population that we designated covered 3 different populations of Topeka Shiner, but we've been working closely with MDC to expand that. So our goal is to put out a new rule to expand that to, I believe, 4 new watersheds. And that process should start this spring. So that's exciting. There's also hellbender propagation efforts and some mussel propagation efforts as well, and probably others that I haven't covered here. The next bin is research and monitoring, and MDC does the lion's share of our listed species monitoring and research, and we definitely appreciate all your efforts on that. Hellbenders are a really good example of how much we partner on recovery efforts. So I think the top picture is Hellbender electrofishing study. The picture all the way to your right, above the bat picture, is Hellbender sperm assessments. The bottom picture is bat monitoring efforts, so that's the Dallas Nature Preserve. We did the second biennial survey this year. The numbers of Indiana bats seem to be slightly declining based on that survey, but that's an effort led by MDC and with help from us. The middle picture is mussel monitoring. We do quite a lot of mussel monitoring and research together, and we appreciate the help of the MDC mussel biologists that we kind of tag team on getting that work done. And Niangua darter, we have lots of Niangua darter projects and recovery progress towards that species. So a lot of great stuff going on. And that's just a few projects to highlight in that category. The third category is my favorite one. And this is habitat restoration and habitat protection. So we have a big project going on right now with MDC in the Lower Osage. So this is the Lower Osage River Protection and Enhancement Program. I think I got all those letters right. It's LORPEP for those of you that have heard that. This is, we are, I think, really close to getting our first habitat restoration project on the ground, and this is with mitigation money from the operation of Bagnell Dam. So we have about $1 million in stream restoration. That picture is an example of side channel habitat that this might be one of the projects that's selected. The goal is to get more flow into those side channel habitats. And that has been quite a heavy lift to get to this point. So definitely appreciate MDC's efforts with landowners and Congress people. Very much appreciated. Another interesting habitat protection program is we've been partnering on the placement of bat mitigation projects. So we had, over years, a couple different pots of money for bat mitigation that come from like pipeline projects or development projects. And there's been a couple of examples of placing those habitat protection projects near conservation areas. So I think we put some into Henry Seaver Lake Conservation Area. And there's 2 more projects with MDC and the Conservation Fund that we're working on, hopefully securing soon. So there's a lot of opportunity for us to do strategic habitat protection associated with bat mitigation. So this is an example of that. This is Sheridan Hills Conservation Bank. This is the first bat conservation bank in the nation. Missouri should be really proud of this. It's 1,300 acres in Adair and Schuyler counties. It's for Indiana bats, northern long-eared bats, little brown bats, and impacts to those species. So they sell credits just like a wetland mitigation bank. I highlighted this as a partnership project because when this company came to us and said they wanted to do a conservation bank, we said, you need to put it adjacent to conservation lands. And you need to have it in a place that MDC thinks is important too. So that's what they did. The first parcel is next to Sugar Creek Conservation Area, and the second parcel is next to Rebels Cove. So this is a really great project that I think we're gonna see more of over time, particularly if the interest in wind development continues in Missouri, because when wind comes in, they have to mitigate for their impacts. So you need strategic opportunities to do that. So conservation banks is a great one. In lieu fee programs is another great one. I'm gonna save those two things for future opportunities, but plant the little seed there. Another big part of our office is, like I said, the Natural Resource Damage and Assessment and Restoration Program. Many of you know this, but together with Missouri Department of Natural Resources, we manage the Southeast Missouri lead mining area and the Tri-State Mining District in Southwest Missouri. And this is enormous area that is multiple Superfund sites, thousands of acres of impacted land, and hundreds of miles of contaminated streams. Right now, we have about $52 million available for restoration projects. Our current thought is that we focus a lot of that money on aquatic projects. We've done a good amount of terrestrial work in the past, so that's the current direction, but sometimes directions change. So our priorities now are to finish out those settlements. So we're still actively trying to settle for those cases that with companies that are responsible. We're particularly looking to do that in the Big River area. And we're trying to better integrate EPA's response and Fish and Wildlife Service and DNR's NRDA restoration together also with the Corps' Merrimack feasibility work. So all of those things together could result in lots of on-the-ground projects and conservation actions. So we're trying to fit them all together to do stream and floodplain restoration, particularly in the Big River, but also in the Merrimack Basin in general. The last bullet is just talking about we want to do good restoration projects that aren't just good for resources, but also good for local communities and partner priorities. So there's a lot of potential to mix together there. On that second bullet, I just wanted to note that we appreciate MDC working with us on the Big River and the Merrimack feasibility study. Real quick, couple examples. This is a really great project. Hopefully you're all familiar with this because it is a really great project. In 2015, we gave MDC, the Nature Conservancy, and Ozark Land Trust $500,000 for restoration practices in Huza and Kodaway watersheds. So this is conservation agricultural projects, and these projects are great. They're mostly wrapped up. Here's some examples. So it's cattle exclusion fencing, it's alternate water sources, it's riparian plantings. These are before projects on the left and after on the right. Here's some more examples of what it looks like when you're putting in the water systems and planting warm season grasses and riparian trees and shrubs. This also includes some reinforced stream crossings and stream bank stabilization with bioengineering techniques. So that's a before and after stream bank restoration project in Huza Creek. The great thing about this project is it was $500,000 of NRDA money, but the partners brought, MDC as a main one, brought additional funding sources to leverage those NRDA dollars by 2 to 1. So ended up being more like $1 million. So the success of this project has resulted in more need and desire to do more of this in that area. So we're about to, well, we're in the planning process, so no final decisions yet, but we're hoping to award another $1 million to this partnership to do more work in that area, which I think is a conservation opportunity area. I forget the name, Shoal, thank you. So a really great win for MDC and the NRDA trustees and all of us, the resources. So here's another project like that. This one is in the Tri-State District, the Shoal Creek Restoration Partnership. This is a partnership that I think MDC helped to initiate where Fish and Wildlife Service, NERDA, trustees, Missouri DNR, and the Nature Conservancy coming together to say, okay, what are the kinds of projects and practices we need to do in Shoal Creek? So they're developing a restoration plan, and we're gonna start funding projects there. The first one is on, I think, MDC property, so it's Lime Kiln Dam. It's a human hazard, drowning hazard, as well as a fish passage blockage. So that'll be a really great project. I think the hope is to fund that one this year. So this is the start of aquatic restoration in Tri-State. So starting small with the Shoal Creek watershed, and the hope is that we have a bigger partnership to do the Spring River in general. So future opportunities, these are just kinds of things that came from pulling this presentation together. An area that I see a lot of overlap is working together on selecting those focal species and those geographies that we need to be working in. Currently, within our office structure, the focus is pretty heavily Merrimack Basin, but other areas as well. So doing that together, I think, would be really great. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of room for strategic mitigation placement. So forested, habitat protection, or restoration. The Conservation Fund has an in lieu fee for Indiana bats that's got about 100 acres banked up in it, so they need to put a 100-acre project on the ground. There's still pipeline mitigation money, about a couple $1 million. And there's multiple companies that approach us all the time to put mitigation banks, conservation banks for bats on the landscape. So if we put our heads together on where are the best places to do that work, I think that would be a really great thing we could do together. Real quick, NRCS, this is happening right now. MDC, DNR, gosh, so many people. TNC, us, EPA, the Corps, I'm gonna miss some partners, are talking about putting together a proposal for an RCPP in the Merrimack Basin. I'm really excited about that. So it would leverage the NERDA dollars along with that additional $1 million that we're gonna be putting into the Hoosick-Cotaway. So get another 2 to 3 million from NRCS to put more conservation agriculture practices on the ground in that basin. So I have my fingers crossed that that goes. I think the application is due in the next month, so it might be a little tight. But that's an opportunity, if we don't do that this year, to think about doing those things in out years. So these are all things that we think about. How do we leverage the money that we do have, as little as it is, for mitigation and just our office funds, and then also the NERDA funds that we have available. Like, how do we put all that into a good package to get more partner priorities met and our own species priorities met? So overlapping priorities. I think that might be it, and I probably went over time. So I was gonna open it up for questions, but I bet I know what question I'm gonna get. Does anyone have any questions?
Can you give us an update on Jasper, Newton County and some of the NERDA prairie restoration work on there?
Yeah, that was not the question. I thought it was gonna be.
I'll ask Anna if nobody else does.
Yeah.
Reorganization.
So your question was an update on the Jasper Newton prairie restoration. So I didn't cover that one here. It was another example of not enough time, but there's been quite a lot of prairie restoration done with NERDA dollars in the tri-state area, in both of those counties, Jasper and Newton. One of the big things we have going on right now is Web City. We've worked with Web City to use biosolids and other compost materials to put soil out on those uncapped, that word, to do prairie restoration because there's no soil out there now. So that project's on the ground or getting on the ground starting this year, 750 acres of restored prairie, which is great. A lot of work with the Missouri Prairie Foundation in that area to do remnant prairie plots and protection down there as well. A small little prairie project with the city of Joplin on one of their parks. And quite a lot of prairie restoration down there as well. So it's good.
Why don't you give us an update on the reorganization and DOI, what you know about it and what it
Sure. I get this question a lot. So that's what I thought I was going to get asked is, what region are you in? So essentially, as far as we've gotten on the reorganization within DOI, Fish and Wildlife Service has adopted DOI's regional boundaries. So Iowa and Missouri are in a new region of the Fish and Wildlife Service. We do not have our own regional director, and we are not getting one. They have created a super region that, so basically the Southeast region is over the old Southeast region, and now this new Mississippi Basin region with Missouri, Iowa, Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, I think. But there hasn't been any official guidance on how that rolls out. So it's business as usual. So we continue to report to the Great Lakes region, through the Great Lakes region, and they're working out how it's all going to be. Missouri and Iowa aren't unique. This is happening with states all over the country where their regional reporting structures are different, or the regional office people that they might typically work with are different. And I think everybody at headquarters is just trying to figure out, and the regional directors are trying to figure out how it's going to work. So that's about all I know at this point is status quo.
I would just, a word of thanks for y'all's support of the projects that we've had up in Northeast Missouri for acquisitions that, were valuable for that and additions to our conservation areas.
Yeah.
It's worked out very well.
I agree. I think there's a lot we can do there. If mitigation continues to have demand in the state, which I think it does for now, so. Great. Thank you.
I've told Karen, and we've worked with DNR on this joint statement about heck no, we won't go out of Region 3. So you can translate that however you want to. But
Can I
thank you.
translate it
Yeah,
like
you can. Thank you so much for your continued partnership. Thanks for coming to join us today.
Thanks for
Thank you very
having me.
much. Mr. Hubbard, come introduce our next presenter.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Come on, a little enthusiasm here in the audience anyway. Good afternoon. There we go. All right, we're getting there. It's getting late in the day. It is my privilege to introduce our next speaker, Miss Doreen Mengel. Doreen's a resource scientist up at the Columbia Science Center. Several years ago, working in collaboration with several others, including Dr. Lisa Webb with Missouri Co-op Unit, Doreen helped initiate a couple of different projects related to a new chemical that we started to see occur in Missouri and across the Midwest. 25 years ago, this set of chemicals was brand new and was hardly anywhere around the country. And today it is being used extensively in a number of Midwestern states and in other parts of the country as well. At that point in time, Doreen and Lisa recognized there could be impacts. We didn't know what they would be or how they would manifest. They initiated two different projects that kind of ran at the same time frame, collaboratively. One of those projects was looking at neonicotinoids and the movement from croplands into grass buffer strips. And the partner project was looking at something similar and its impact on benthic invertebrates into wetland areas as these chemicals, and there's several of them that we refer to as neonicotinoids, and what their overall impact is to the system. Through time, they've learned quite a few things, but what Doreen's going to talk to us about today is where are these chemicals in Missouri? How strong are the concentrations where they do exist? What does that really mean to us and the systems that we have? And what do our management actions, how do they impact the movement of those chemicals? Do they have any positive or negative or no impacts from our management action on those chemicals and the systems that we're in charge of managing? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Doreen.
Thanks a lot, Mike. I appreciate it. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. As Mike said, we've been working on these projects for probably the last 4 to 5 years. There's been a number of folks that were involved in the various projects, and interestingly, most of them are now out of state, have jobs elsewhere. So Lisa Webb is here this morning, and I don't know if that's a reflection on her talent in teaching her students and preparing them for the future work environment, but we've been really successful with our folks moving on to other jobs. So I have the honor of presenting the findings that result from a lot of hard work from other people, and Lisa's here to answer any technical questions you guys might have when I'm finished. These projects are all extraordinarily collaborative. They involved a number of agencies, people, organizations, but I'd like to give a particular shout out to the area staff on the areas where we conducted the projects. Without their interest, cooperation, and collaboration, we would never have gotten any of them done. So I'm going to fight technology apparently today, but what I'm going to do is give a brief introduction to what neonicotinoids are in case anybody's never heard of them, and then describe the outcomes from an aquatic project that we did and an agroecosystem based project, and then give some management implications at the end. So neonicotinoids are neuroactive insecticides that are chemically similar to nicotine, hence the name neonicotinoids. They're designed to target agricultural pests and were rolled out as an idea that they were a better alternative to some of the older class insecticides such as the organophosphates. Their mode of action is to bind to and activate the postsynaptic neonicotinic acetylcholine receptors, of which invertebrates have proportionally more of those than vertebrates. So the idea is that they're less acutely toxic to vertebrates such as mammals, birds, and humans. They're very flexible in how they can be used. There's a number of different application methods, but the method that we focused on was as an agricultural seed treatment. There are probably about 7 or 8 neonicotinoid active ingredients. The 3 that we focused on were imidacloprid, clothianidin, and thiamethoxam. In terms of seed treatments, the way that these things work is there's basically a cocktail of compounds applied to the seed prior to planting. The seed is then planted. The chemicals that are applied can include insecticides, fungicides, nematicides. And as the seed is planted, the chemicals interact with the moisture in the soil and kind of produce a halo around the seed. Then the plant sucks the chemicals up into the plant throughout the plant via its root system and physiology, making the entire plant toxic to any insect that bites it, chews on it, or sucks the fluid from it. And as a result of this, these chemicals are fairly water soluble, which means they're more attracted to water than the soil, so they have a tendency to move around if there's a heavy rain event. They also are fairly persistent, so once they're in the environment, they're there for a fairly long period of time. So how did the department get involved in these projects? Back in 2014, we were at a Waterfowl Hunt Committee meeting, and Mike Schreier brought our attention to a paper that had recently been published with findings from a project that was conducted across Prairie, Canada. And they had detected neonicotinoids in 91% of the wetlands that they sampled, which raised a lot of questions for us. At that time, we didn't even know the extent to whether or not these were chemicals that were used in Missouri, and if they were they in our wetlands? And if they are in our wetlands, what are those implications to have an insecticide within the wetlands? And what are the effects on the aquatic macroinvertebrates within those wetlands? So to address these questions, we developed a project that looked at neonicotinoid concentrations within the wetlands, and then what are the implications for the invertebrates. This project was headed up by Kyle Keachy, our master's student. And the objectives, the first two objectives were to first, what are the prevalence of neonicotinoids in Missouri? And then do surface waters, waters that we pump directly into wetlands, are they a source of contamination? In order to do the study, we stratified the state based upon agricultural intensity. So the red in the map indicates areas of high agricultural intensity, orange is medium, and yellow is low. So Kyle randomly selected 10 conservation areas on which he conducted the project. Each conservation area had 4 wetlands. One was a wetland that had been planted with neonicotinoid seed treatments 5 of the previous 5 years. One had never been planted the previous 5 years, and the other 2 fell somewhere in between those 2 ranges, within that range. And so he collected samples in 4 time periods: the spring of 2016 prior to planting, the summer of 2016 after planting, the fall of 2016 as the wetlands were being inundated. And at that time, he also took samples from the source water, the water being pumped into the wetlands. And then the final sampling period was the spring of 2017 prior to planting of that year. So we detected neonicotinoids in 60% of the water samples, and the concentrations were relatively low, with the highest occurring after planting, which is probably not surprising. So what does that mean in terms of toxicity? In 2015, Morrissey et al. Published a paper that suggested the chronic exposure threshold of 0.035 parts per billion. And at that threshold, we only had the one time period where we exceeded that threshold. Then in 2017, the EPA published an alternate threshold of 0.01 parts per billion. And at that threshold, all but one of our sampling periods were either equal or exceeded that threshold. In terms of sediment, we detected neonicotinoids in 63% of the sediment samples. And although it's difficult to make a direct comparison between water concentrations and sediment concentrations, because one's a volume and one is a mass, the sediment concentrations that we found were about an order of magnitude higher than the water concentrations. And so then if you kind of look at, so this graph puts the two kind of in a similar, just to give an idea of how much lower the water concentrations were. And then there's the chronic exposure from the EPA. In terms of what these concentrations mean in sediment, it's hard to say because nobody's ever really looked at the sediment. Our project is one of the first that's really detected this degree of concentrations in sediment. And so at this point, the implications of those concentration levels are kind of an unknown. Another interesting thing to come from this project was these two graphs indicate the number of detections in each of the wetlands. And so not surprising, most of the detections occurred in the wetlands that were planted 5 out of the previous 5 years. But what's really interesting is those wetlands that were not planted with neonicotinoids in any of the previous 5 years were not a zero. We still found concentrations in those areas. So basically, to sum that up, neonicotinoids were present at about a similar rate in the sediment and the water. On average, the sediment concentrations were greater than the water concentrations. Sediments are kind of a previously unconsidered route of exposure for organisms. And then the fact that we found neonicotinoids in wetlands without direct planting for the previous 5 years. So then our next objective was to try to determine, what does this mean? Are there implications of the fact that we found these chemicals and those concentration levels? So in order to address this question, we had a different set of wetlands. So there's no overlap from these wetlands to the ones I discussed previously on 9 different conservation areas, and we had 2 treatments. So we had paired wetlands. One was planted with untreated seed, and the seed didn't have anything on it. The other was planted to seed treated with Cruiser Max Corn 250, which is a commercially available product that includes not only neonicotinoids, in this case, the neonicotinoid was thiamethoxam, but it also includes fungicides. And so these are what's called coefficient graphs. So anything that falls on the dotted line of 0 is no effect. If it's to your left, it's a negative effect. To your right is a positive effect. The red are the insect abundance. The gray is non-insect, so like crustaceans. And then black is overall. And the red, the majority of the insects, about 70% of the insects we found were dipteran, and of those, about 90% were chironomids. So for all intents and purposes, the insects we detected were pretty much chironomids. So we saw a slightly negative effect on insect abundance from water concentrations. I haven't really talked about fungicides just from time considerations, but fungicides are not an innocuous inclusion in the seed treatment. We have found some sort of interaction, so there is something going on with fungicides. So there was a negative effect on insect abundance from sediment fungicide, a slightly negative effect on insect abundance from sediment concentrations. The treatment in the fall of 2016, we did see a negative effect, but then they recovered by the following spring of 2017. In terms of richness, this is invertebrate richness, we saw again a negative effect from the sediment concentrations on abundance and overall abundance, a negative effect on insect abundance through treatments in the fall of, this is richness now. So in the fall of 2016, there was a negative effect on richness, and you note these lines get longer. That's an indication of variability. So if any of you have ever done an aquatic insect study, they tend to be a little messy. The data tends to be a little messy, but still we did see negative response. And then there was recovery in the spring of 2017, but you noted richness doesn't quite recover to the extent that abundance recovered. And so a fair question, a question we get fairly often is, well, what does that really matter? So yeah, there was a negative response, but there was recovery, so no harm, no foul, right? Well, thinking about wetlands and what this means in terms of when does this decline in essence, food resources occur? And again, most of these were dipterans, most of these were chironomids. The larval form of chironomids is what's called bloodworms. It's a very important food resource for shorebirds and other water birds. As an adult, they are a very important source for tree swallows and other nesting water birds. And so the time that this decline happened was in the fall, just when migrating birds are showing up. Potentially birds are nesting birds, may be raising their young. So there could be implications to wetland food webs if there is a chronic exposure and decline in abundance at certain times when these species need these critters. So based upon experimental data, we found that there was a negative effect of neonicotinoid concentrations on insect abundance and taxa richness. And then the use of agricultural seed treatments, which includes fungicides. Again, this isn't just neonicotinoids, there's more going on and some different interactions, but the seed treatments seem to have the potential to reduce seasonal insect abundance, which may then affect wetland food webs. So now moving to the uplands and to the project that we conducted in the agroecosystem. In this system, we looked at native bee abundance and richness, and this time we were looking at soybean fields treated with imidacloprid. And we were looking at not only the fields, but also the adjacent margins to those fields. This project was conducted, the principal investigator was Anson Main, which if any of you paid attention, that paper that I talked about that was from Prairie Canada, the project in Prairie Canada, Anson was the same Main et al. That conducted that project. So we were really fortunate to get an extraordinarily accomplished ecotoxicologist involved in this project, which benefited all of the projects that we did. And Lisa and I would be the first to tell you we are not ecotoxicologists. So our questions here were fairly similar to the aquatic system questions. First, we wanted to know what were the neonicotinoid concentrations in the field, both the field and the field margin soils, as well as the plants. And then once we figured out what the concentrations were, was that having a negative effect on pollinators? We started out thinking generally about pollinators, but then focused in on native bees. And as we analyzed the data, we kind of sorted the native bees based upon flower or floral or feeding guilds and nesting guilds. So the floral guilds included specialists, which are bees that use just a few or related plants, like sunflower specialists or goldenrod specialists. And generalists basically have never met a flower they didn't like. On the nesting side, we have ground nesting bees and then cavity nesting bees. And the reason the cavity nesting bees, what's interesting is they use plant materials in order to construct their cavities. So we were interested in is there an effect if a bee that nests in the ground is in contact with soil that may have neonicotinoids, or a bee that nests using plant material, does the plant material have neonicotinoids, and is there an effect there? So this project was conducted in northeast Missouri on 5 conservation areas, and 2016 was our first year in which we just established baseline information, and we had 2 treatments. We had 2 fields, each area had 6 fields. 2 fields had never been planted to neonicotinoids to the best of our knowledge, or the manager's knowledge. 2 fields, and then the other 4 fields had all been planted to neonicotinoids. And in order to find fields that had never been planted to neonicotinoids, they pretty much had to be not tilled fields. So they tended to be either hay fields or old fields. So from 2016, one of the things that surprised me, I didn't really expect, I guess I didn't expect a terribly diverse bee community. And in actual fact, we found a really diverse community. So our agroecosystems on our areas are I think, a good representation of the native bee populations in Missouri. So we didn't see a treatment effect on bee abundance, but what we did find was that the composition of bees we found varied between treated and untreated areas. So the treated areas had the larger sized bees like Melisodes, the longhorn bees, versus the untreated areas tended to have the smaller bees, the Halictes, the Lasioglossum, which are sweat bees. In 2016, we pretty much found neonicotinoids everywhere we looked, whether it was a treated field, an untreated field, a margin associated with a treated field, or a margin associated with an untreated field. One of the questions we also had was, how do ecological variables affect bee populations? Because we figured this would directly tie to the management activities that we do on the areas. And so, probably not surprisingly, floral diversity positively influences wild bees. Particularly the specialist bees have a positive effect. Again, these are those coefficient graphs. So to the right of the dotted line is positive, to the left is a negative. And if it touches, so there was no effect on the cavity nesters due to floral diversity. So it's important not only to have a lot of flowers available when these bees are active, but to have many different kinds of flowers. So basically manage for the rainbow in terms of floral diversity. Margin area was important. It's not just the width of the margin, but just the area available to them has a positive influence on bee populations. And then this one surprised me when we first found it, but that as the percent of woodland in the area surrounding the areas increased, you had a negative effect on bees. Again, not really so much on the cavity nesters, but on the other bees. And what we kind of think is going on here is, one, we were more interested in bees associated with open areas, so it's probably not surprising that as they wouldn't be so much associated with the woodland. Plus, most of the woodlands associated with these fields were woody draws, so they tended to be fairly closed canopy and not a whole lot of floral diversity in the understory. So then in terms of treatment, what did we find? And again, our treatment here were soybean fields that were treated, or soybeans that were treated with imidacloprid. And this time we had 3 treatments now. So remember the original 6 fields, the 2 that were untreated we planted with untreated seed. But the seed didn't have the imidacloprid. It had fungicides, but not imidacloprid. 2 of the previously treated fields were planted with untreated seed, and then 2 of the fields that were treated remained planted to treated seeds. So we have untreated fields, previously treated, and treated. And the reason we had that previously treated category was because one of the questions we had was, well, if we stop planting these things, is that enough? Or will we continue to see an effect? So we were trying to look at that. So in 2017 and 2018, we had fewer detections in 2017 than 2018. We really didn't have any detections in the untreated areas, so then they serve as a fairly decent reference to our treated areas. And then in 2018, we had, the maximum concentration was order of magnitude higher than what we found in 2017. And any of you remember these years, 2017 was a really wet year, 2018 was a very dry year. So we suspect that in 2017, the amount of rainfall we had pretty much washed the chemicals away. In 2018, it was so dry that the chemicals were pretty much bound up in the field, which may have influenced the fact that we didn't really have a whole lot of detections in those untreated areas. We didn't detect neonicotinoids in any of the flowers. We sampled flowers from both the margin areas and the soybeans and had no detections. We don't really know why, because other studies have detected neonicotinoids in plants, but we didn't. So in terms of differences between treatments, what did we find? There was a difference in nesting guild abundance by treatment, with ground nesting bees declining across treatments with fewer in treated fields. And again, thinking about the life history of these organisms, they emerge, there's different species that emerge throughout the summer. So the period of time that bees are active are from, as it starts to warm up in early spring to about mid-fall. But the adults are only active for about 3 to 4 weeks. So typically the males emerge first, then the females, they mate, the males die, the females go off and establish the nest. So she lays her eggs, she provisions the nest, and then she dies. So that the adults are only active for that short period of time. And the young are in their nest cavity for basically 10 to 11 months. So the period of time when they are in contact with the soil is what may lead to the negative effect that we see based on treatment. Then was there a negative effect of neonicotinoids in field concentrations over both years? And again, we found that neonicotinoids negatively impacted wild bee abundance, with soils containing greater concentrations of neonicotinoids having fewer bees. Untreated fields had fewer of the floral specialists, and this one's a little interesting because there's a significant relationship with fewer floral bees in the previously treated, and although there were fewer floral bees in the treated areas, it wasn't a significant relationship. And so again, a fair question here may be, well, okay, you guys had a lot of environmental variation. Could that not explain a lot of the difference you're seeing? And so 2016 was kind of an average year, 2017 was that really wet year, and 2018 was that really dry year. And we looked at the effect of rainfall, and it accounted for about 13% of the variation that we saw. So that still leaves 87% unaccounted for. So we are confident that the effects we see, we think, are related to the field concentrations we found. And so basically what we found was between years there were fewer ground nesting bees in treated and previously treated fields. Compared to untreated fields, there were significantly fewer floral specialists in previously treated fields, and abundance and richness was negatively affected by neonicotinoids in field soils. So again, somewhat similar to that aquatic project, we believe that soil is kind of an overlooked route of exposure for these bees, and that there seems to be a differential impact on nesting guilds between the ground nesting bees and the cavity nesting bees. So, what do we know? We know that aquatic insects experience a negative impact from neonicotinoid and fungicide concentrations in water and sediment, and that wild bee abundance and richness were negatively impacted by neonicotinoids in field soils. But what we don't know is whether or not we are studying a community or systems that have already adjusted to the introduction of neonicotinoids. Neonicotinoids came into the market in the late to mid 1990s. They really kind of took off in the early 2000s. And it could be we missed that acute decline. So we may have already missed the really sharp declines that we may have seen. And what we are seeing is a chronic, an adaptation to chronic exposure. And it's hard to say exactly because we don't have the best baseline information. But so what I would leave you with is the fact that neonicotinoids are part of the story of what's going on here. I think some of the biggest issues with neonicotinoids is the way in which they're used. They're used as a seed treatment, and they're applied whether there's an issue and whether they're needed or not. So it's the widespread use that seems to be the issue, and the fact that they move around. And so we need to think about them. We need to think about what their impact is in the environment. But I think it's also important to realize that what we do in terms of timing and extent of management activities, both on public and private land, is important. So whether we're talking about duration of water or the timing and duration of drawdowns or flood ups, or the amount of what we plant, where we plant it, what practices we do that contribute to soil health, the timing and extent of practices like mowing, disking, burning, depth of tillage, whether or not we do a targeted activity, whether we mow targeted so that we try to leave flowering plants during the entire time that bees need them, or do we tend to mow so that it looks pretty? I think these things matter and play a role in organizing and influencing insect communities. And we oftentimes think of ourselves in terms of the vertebrate species that are our ultimate targets. So whether we think of ourselves as a wetland manager, a small game manager, a quail manager, a turkey manager, a grassland manager, a woodland manager, or a forest manager, oftentimes in these systems, the actions that we are doing are intended to result in a diverse and abundant insect community. So perhaps our aspiration is to be a bug manager. And I think this is important and is summed up in this quote by David Attenborough, in that if we disappeared today, the world would carry on, but if insects disappeared, the world would collapse. So with that, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Maureen, do you think you limit yourself by using just pollinators? When you're looking at, I mean, you've got pollinators, you've got autophagous insects, you've got grazers, you've got all of the different other types of insects there, all of which can be cavity dwelling, can be ground nesting, all of the above. And you're only looking at one little bitty tiny part.
Okay, yeah, the question is whether or not we limited ourselves by just looking at native bees, because there's such a whole host of other insects. And my thinking would be that, one, field studies are really difficult because there's a whole lot of variation, and it's very difficult to try to control that variation. And so I think to a certain extent, to try to get at the question you're trying to ask, you have to limit yourself. And my guess would be that you could pick any of those different groups you're talking about and probably see some difference if they interact with plants in this degree. I suspect that there's a difference. One of the things we really couldn't get into here is in the aquatic system, we found a somewhat different response and recovery, whether you're talking about predators versus the chironomids. There seemed to be less recovery by those predators. So my guess is the longer lived insects are probably going to be more affected and have a less quick response, so that you're not going to see that full recovery by the following spring. So yeah, I think there's tons more questions here to be asked than, I mean, we've just barely scratched the surface. And when we started these projects again, it seems strange now, Lisa and I have talked about this, but at the time, we didn't even know if neonicotinoids were being used in Missouri. We didn't know if they were even here. So I feel like we've come a long ways from what we've learned, but there's still a lot more questions to be asked. The interactions between the the neonicotinoids and the fungicides, I think, is definitely something that needs further investigation. And so, yeah, I think there's, of things, you know, anytime you do a project, you always think about, well, what would I have done different? I don't think I would have done any different picking the native bees. I think the native bees are a really good indicator, and I think would serve us well. We've got really good information now. We've kind of got that baseline information from Northeast Missouri. I'd like to see us get a similar data set in other parts of the state, perhaps on the priority geography areas, so that I think that could serve as a fairly good indicator of how well our management practices do going forward.
Lori, one of the things that I think we talked about a long time ago, and you may have looked at it as well. Do wetlands have any, I hate to say benefit, but do they impact the half-life of some of these chemicals at all?
Wetlands have lots of benefits. I'm sorry, I can't let that go. Okay, so do wetlands, okay, yes, one thing, to a degree, one thing we didn't really talk about was that difference between the sediment concentrations and the water concentrations. It's kind of interesting when you go through the process of publishing papers and having reviewers. We had a really good ecotoxicologist review the paper that we published on that part of the project. And she looked at it and said, well, your system's not in equilibrium. So there are different values you can get, and you can kind of determine based upon your concentrations what you would expect to see. And ours are not in equilibrium. Don't know this for sure, but what may play into it is when you have anoxic conditions or lack of oxygen and you increase the temperature, it greatly increases the degradation of the chemicals. So it could be, depending upon the timing of a drawdown, we may be introducing oxygen to the system that then binds the chemical to the sediment. And so it may be that we can somewhat, when we add water in the fall, when we take water off in the spring, it may play into that relationship that potentially it may be possible to increase the degradation if you have those conditions. I mean, again, that's a hypothesis. I don't know that for sure, but that's one I would be really interested in pursuing further to see if there's some relationship going on there. Because I find it very strange that they're not in equilibrium, and you just have to ask that question, what's going on there?
I'll ask a follow-up to that, Melissa. So do wetlands provide any kind of a buffer for the movement of these things through the system, out of the croplands, through the wetlands and all? Or not?
Repeat the question, please.
Whether or not wetlands serve as a buffer to keep the chemicals from moving. I don't know if wetlands necessarily do. I think they're more the receiver of the chemicals. We did have a project that looked at vegetative buffer strips to see if they play a role. And so we looked at sediment or soils taken from the crop field, a grassy buffer, herbaceous buffer, and trees that had developed under trees. And both the grassy buffer and the trees retained the chemicals for a long period of time. As a matter of fact, under the riparian soil basically leveled out, and the time of the project ended, and it still was retaining them. So what we don't know from that project is how bioavailable are the chemicals if you hold them in that buffer strip. But I somewhat think, the thing you could play around with is, what if we had grassy strips adjacent to crop fields, floral-rich strips further away, so that maybe you didn't attract pollinators to something that you're catching the chemicals with, and then the tree strips. So I think if you have that system, you could begin to reduce the amount of chemical that ends up ultimately in the wetland. These chemicals have also been found in rivers and streams, both in Iowa, so I assume in Missouri. I don't remember if I mentioned the fact that we did find chemicals or concentrations in the source water. So even if they end up, where they end up in wetlands, whether it's from overbank flow, direct application of water, direct planting, they're kind of showing up there. So the project that we had done, our first question was, can buffer strips in the upland keep the chemicals from ever getting to the wetland? And then once the chemical is in the wetland, are there activities we can do that maybe would increase the degradation of them? Does that answer what you're asking? Yes, Bill.
I think you alluded to this, but next steps, we have plans to do these studies. We talked about COAs.
Yeah, I would promote the idea. I would like to carry this on to establishing bee community, or getting information on bee communities in priority areas or COAs. I think they could serve as, again, an indicator for our management activities, how we're doing. Lisa and I haven't really talked about it, but we're just kind of wrapping it. As a matter of fact, we're still kind of looking at the data from the agroecosystem project. What I presented today is kind of very preliminary, but I think we're at the point of kind of trying to figure out. I'm really interested in that interaction between the fungicide and the neonicotinoids. I didn't really talk about it, but another finding we had was that there was this interesting interaction that if neonicotinoids were low in the soil but high, and fungicides, what was it? If neonicotinoids were low in the soil and fungicides were low, then there was no effect on the bee community. But if both were high, so fungicides are high in the plants and high concentrations in the soil, there was a negative effect, a very negative effect on bees. So there seems to be some sort of synergetic relationship between fungicides, that neonicotinoids, that we didn't even consider going into this. It just so happened that as we did the chemical analysis, fungicides kept popping up. And so again, they're not an innocuous inclusion in those treatments. Yeah, and we do still have another project going on, because as we were doing these projects, we realized that we may not be seeing acute responses. So what's the chronic? Again, is there an effect on reproduction, on pollinator activity? And so we have a grad student right now, Robert Abney, who's looking at nesting bees. And so we're going to send off the larvae in those cavities to see if there's neonicotinoids in there. He also put out some plates to see, because another route of exposure is during planting activities. The dust cloud that gets kicked up is a source of neonicotinoid exposure. And so he put some plates up to see if we could see if any showing up on those plates. So we still have an ongoing project that'll be really, I think, will very much add to the information we got from these. Anything else? All right. I thank you.
Awesome, thank you. All right, Ms. Kendra Woodhouse, I think the last time we were all together in this form and fashion was October 1st, when we did our first rollout of the new organizational roadmap in the way of structure. And so in the spirit of just making sure that we continue to provide updates, I've asked Kendra to tell us what the implementation team has been up to.
I'm pretty positive mine will not be as exciting as what we've just heard. But anyway, I did want to be able to provide an update on the progress of the implementation team. Okay, so just a little bit about our roadmap for today. We're going to give you a roadmap reminder, a structure subcommittee progress report, a new leadership positions report, not the new regional administrators though, a pulse survey, ongoing communications, and next steps. So if you remember, one of the things that Sarah shared with us on October 1st as part of the presentation was really about our new system of governance. And so I just wanted to take a moment just to revisit and reflect on what the new way of doing business for MDC will look like. And so it includes things like a unified strategic priorities. We will continually assess them, budget to them, plan to them, and align to them. The integrated resource management. We've already started an integrated approach to natural resource management with our work on priority geography teams, wetland review teams, district coordination teams, but we want to formalize this approach. In essence, form now follows function. Our new system of governance is also characterized by regional empowerment and accountability, giving the resources flexibility and authority where much of the work of conservation gets done, but also placing accountability here as well. Another concept of this new system of governance is centralized standards guiding regional implementation to ensure we don't build up 8 ways of doing business, creating inconsistencies and inefficiencies. We will centralize standards and guidelines through training and coordination, compliance, and auditing. Another concept of the new system of governance is continuous improvement. This includes everything from a constant review of our processes and procedures to ensuring we identify measures and measure our efforts for success. A culture of continuous improvement also means the agency will be more focused on strategic and operational planning and improved data stewardship, and yes, more adaptive to change in the future. And finally, another concept of this new system of governance includes a heightened focus on our customers. From a new focus on relevancy to public use to measuring customer experience, we must work to better define and sustain the public will. So we've seen this slide before too, and it talks really about the implementation subcommittee. So I thought I would just take a little bit to kind of go over what that means. I've received probably over 75 emails from individuals that are willing and interested in helping with the process for moving us forward with our new MDC. And so some of you have already been engaged, while there have others that have not been. There are really varying degrees of help that will be needed. The divisions are currently working on their structures. The regional work is partly underway. Part of that will really ramp up after the regional administrators have been named. But this work's going to be going on for quite some time. So just because you've maybe not been engaged right this second doesn't mean that there still will not be an opportunity, because there's much work to be done over the next several months. And so some of you still may have questions about what does all of this really involve. And so I thought I would just take a minute to give you a quick update and a brief overview of that. Currently, right now, our structure and our process teams are working together simultaneously, and well, actually as one team. And so we're really working to complete the new structure that with the framework that Sarah had shared with us on October 1st. We will accomplish this by defining the function of the units of work and associated roles, by analyzing and understanding current and future work, by identifying and designing or revising core processes to facilitate completion of the new organizational structure, as well as determining any processes to be updated as well. We also want to be able to identify barriers to any new processes. Our goal is not to create inefficiencies in the work that we're doing. Additionally, reviewing existing agency committees and the possibility of new committees. And the team will also be outlining transitional processes, such as how do we transition to the new structure. So lots of work over a long period of time to be done with the structure and process teams. The communication team is responsible for overseeing major communication to the organization, addressing overall communication improvements that are needed, as well as developing numerous communication plans and working to determine the effectiveness of those communications. The training team, as other subcommittees are working, will be identifying training needs. This team will work to plan and implement that training. This could include discipline training, organizational training, as well as leadership training. So a lot of that comes once the teams provide recommendations and identify the needs for training. The technology team will be identifying technology systems that must be updated for the organizational structure changes, assembling cross-functional teams to address required system updates, and identifying changes to existing and new data required to support the structure changes. Our measures and survey team will be working with the core team and subcommittees to identify and track success measures. working with the change manager to survey employees as well. So lots more work to be done on that team as well. The culture team actually has been working fairly steadily along with the communication team, identifying opportunities and risk associated with agency culture regarding the restructuring, determining concrete ways to improve the agency culture and ensure changes align with the new structure, as well as defining a set of agency values and the culture that it surrounds. So at this time, it's kind of difficult to really individually predict how much time any one person might be needed. I know individuals have said, well, you know, what's the time requirement? I don't know if I can do this or want to do this because of what it will entail. But really, there's varying amounts of work to be done, and really there's room for people who do have a desire, whether it's a short period of time or a longer period of time. But I do assure you that we have compiled a list of those that have expressed interest, and those have been shared with the subcommittee leads. And so stay tuned, because the work will continue. Let's see. So just a little bit about the structure subcommittee. Got my notes out of line here. So the structure and process subcommittees have been combined and continuing to work that way for the next few months. And so just to give you a little bit of update, we are currently there are about 13 teams right now that are working across the agency, primarily at the central office. The regional teams really haven't ramped up quite yet, but they're doing check-ins with the core team every 2 weeks on our progress, and so lots of great work going on there. The core team is meeting weekly, as well as we are giving administration a weekly update as well. So lots of work surrounding the structure and process subcommittee. We're also working on job descriptions for any functions that maybe are new or revised. And we're continuing to look at all the processes, particularly if it's a process that may impact the way that we structure ourselves. So with the goal still being December 31st to have the roles laid out and in the boxes, we're working hard and pretty consistently. So I do appreciate those that are spending time working on this on a regular basis. So just a little bit, there's really nothing new on this slide, except to just reemphasize that one of the things that we wanted to do is share with you as new leadership roles were named. And as you know, Sarah had shared on October 1st that we have the Assistant to Deputy of Resource Management, which is John Tuttle, and the Statewide Resource Management, which is Brian Kennedy. The government liaison has been interviewed for, and I think we'll be very close to having an announcement on that, as well as the regional administrators. 2 very long days of interviews for that team, and again, we hope to have those that announcement come very soon. So stay tuned for that. So one of the things that we want to do is our ongoing commitment to being closely connected as we navigate the change together is we want to be able to take a quick pulse check of how you experienced the October 1st all-employee engagement and any subsequent communications that you've had from the leadership team so far. And so watch for this in your email. It should take less than 5 minutes to answer the questions. You should receive a separate email with a link. If you don't see it in your email inbox within the next few days, be sure to check your junk email folder. And once we compile the responses, key findings, and how they will inform the process ahead, those will be communicated with you. We had planned to be able to provide this information about the survey when we have the announcement ready for our next set of communications from Sarah, but we may end up going ahead and sending that out. So don't be surprised if you do receive a link very soon with, again, it's a very short 5-question pulse survey that will really help us know if we are communicating the way that we need to be communicating with you. Some of the ongoing communications, we will continue to provide director email updates. Maybe we can get her to do a video soon. The SharePoint site with FAQs and presentations will continue to populate that site. We certainly hope that there is supervisor support, one-on-one interactions with your leadership team. And so if not, I encourage you, for any questions or concerns that you have, to please share with your supervisor. settings like this, the all-staff WebEx meetings, and then there'll be upcoming regional meetings scheduled for February and March. So lots more opportunities to communicate with you going forward. So next steps. Continuing to engage staff for ongoing subcommittee work. Again, that timeline is a little sketchy because there's a lot of work to be done through the middle of next year. And so hopefully at different points in time, we'll be able to tap you on the shoulder. And if you're willing to help us, we're willing to take the help from you. The structure and process work continues with ongoing input from the different divisions. Again, they're participating in every 2-week check-ins with us, and that will continue through December 31st at the minimum. Ongoing pulse surveys and communications, as well as culture training, technology, and measures and surveys subcommittees team. Some have already ramped up, but others will be ramping up very soon. So really that's where we're at. We're on our way. It's the beginning of the new chapter in the department's history. We've listened, we've responded. As a result, we are better preparing the way to deliver on our mission. There's still a lot of work to be done. We'll report out to you regularly. Again, I just would like to emphasize, I know Sarah would tell you the same thing, to try not to be anxious about it. Our goal is really to make sure that there's a place and career opportunities for everyone in the organization. And that I hope that despite maybe some fear of change, that this will be a time of excitement for our organization and a time for us to really spring forward. Our citizens are counting on us, and we're definitely the team to get this work done. So more to come. I just want to say thank you for the divisions and their teams that are working tirelessly to get us where we need and to be open-minded and to really think differently, maybe than what we have, in the past. So I do appreciate the effort that's been put forth to that. Do you have any questions? All right, that was pretty easy.
Thank you very much. Lots of hard work going on down the hill, so thank you so much for all of that. So now, last but certainly not least, our division chief updates, and I'm David. Why don't you, as is our practice, just go ahead and line up. If you've got an update for us, go ahead and line up, and we'll just hear from you.
I'm David Thorne from Policy Coordination, and Amy Beekler has been working steadily after the Partner Roundtable meeting to prepare a draft report, and it's under review. As usual, it's awesome about an awesome meeting, and we've all been quick to thank all of the staff that participated to make that meeting success. And also in the vein of continuous improvement, you'll recall during that meeting there were some turning technology questions, and a couple at the end were really insightful. One, 92% of the folks said they either strongly or agreed that they trusted the name of the Department of Conservation. That is a really powerful, off-the-chart kind of result. Also, were they able to give meaningful input? And by far the majority said yes, almost 80%. We still got to work on those few maybe that for whatever reason we're not having the right one-on-one dialogue. Also, we ask staff with an after and participants with an after the meeting review, and we've been using the customer experience team's been recommending some high-level questions. The Net Promoter Score, which is the number of people that would recommend the meeting to others, and you subtract off through a formula the folks that would not recommend, and we got a score of 51 on that, which if you recall some of the other information, anything above 0 is great. So that's an off-the-chart again kind of result, still an opportunity for improvement, but it's super. And then we looked at what was satisfying aspects of it, so all that information really useful to help guide the planning of the next awesome meeting. And again, we'll thank staff for their ongoing participation in that. I thought you might be interested in some of the results, and then as that report gets finished, we'll make it available to all staff. Questions? Other questions? Super, thanks.
Good afternoon. Randy Dolman, Protection Division Chief, and I've got quite a bit to cover here for a division update. It is the season. poachers are in full activity, and so are our agents, working around the clock. Our 2019 class of 11 conservation agents has been out in the field since early October, and they've been thrown right into the fire, working on their field training assignments, burning both ends of the candle, from working spotlighters at 2 or 3 a.m. to working waterfowl activity at 4 and 5 a.m. and all kinds of activities during the daytime as well. So staff are staying busy. One example here was on our Facebook post earlier today. We've had 3 deer poached and left lay in Rawls County over the weekend. One nice buck here at 3 a.m. last Saturday morning, and we're partnering with the Rawls County Sheriff's Office to try and apprehend those individuals, and that's just one example of 114 counties around the state, and that's just one of many examples. So staff are working hard, and Conservation Agent Matt Easton is working hard to find those folks and hold them responsible. In addition, up in northwest Missouri, Holt County Conservation Agent Jade Wright put together another very successful Big Muddy duck hunt in keeping with our theme of partnerships with the Fish and Wildlife Service and others. Jade's partnered with the Fish and Wildlife Service, Delta Waterfowl, DU, Big Muddy Association, and many, many others to put together at least the 10th, if not more, Big Muddy Youth Duck Hunt. This year we had 11 youth participants who harvested 5 ducks, and each participant received an average of about $300 in care packages and door prizes. So a very successful event involving staff from all across Northwest region. More complete community policing activity. Our night vision thermal imagery arrests continue, and those are hard to make, by the way, as you can imagine. Congrats to Sarah Ferran in Pike County, who made 3 outstanding arrests on folks illegally using night vision equipment just last week. She stopped them for spotlighting, and one was a convicted felon, and in their vehicle possession was a 20-gauge shotgun and a 22 caliber AR rifle as well, with thermal imaging device. So as the technology continues to increase, so do our poachers' sophistication in using that equipment to find ways to violate the code. So, and that wasn't the only night vision case that was made. Scott Brown made a similar case in Barton County earlier in October. 2 guys from Kansas with a 22 mag rifle and night vision scope mounted on the rifle itself. Some of these newer technologies are replacing the old school spotlights and what have you as technology continues to advance. Also, shout out to Carter County Conservation Agent David Baldridge for his work with the Assistant U.S. Attorney Keith Sorrell in Southeast region for those individuals that were breaking into Peck Ranch Conservation Area with their stolen night vision thermal imagery equipment. Did a great job on the stand there to testify in the suppression hearing, and they won the suppression hearing, and we'll continue with the prosecution for those individuals. So, good examples of community policing work there. It's not just deer activity right now, ongoing timber theft. Johnny, we got more timber theft cases were being made in Texas County. Conservation agents Chris Ely and Jeff Kreitz worked a timber theft case in Texas County, and this is from the archives of being in the right place at the right time. These Spartan trail cameras that we've talked about that agents use that send signals to their cell phones, based on some very observant behavior by agents Ely and Kreitz, they noticed one of their landowners' gates had been jarred open and the chain and the padlock been removed. So knowing there's a good stand of walnut timber on the property, they set up a trail camera on the gate entrance, and literally within 1 hour and 13 minutes of setting up the Spartan camera, they had somebody on film breaking into the area. It doesn't happen like that way very often, trust me. You set the cameras up, 1, you hope you don't get caught setting the camera up, and 2, it may take days and weeks before you find somebody. In this case, 1 hour and 13 minutes. So within that time, Agent Ely and 3 Texas County deputies were there on scene within 43 minutes. And sure enough, caught 2 subjects in there with a truck and a trailer hauling walnut logs out of the property. And during the interview afterwards, they admitted to stealing logs from the Forest Service property nearby as well. So great work by both of those agents there. Very proud of their service on that. And finally, last but not least, congratulations to Conservation Agent Shannon Orenberg for her back-to-back selection as Missouri's NWTF Wildlife Officer of the Year. 2 years in the running for her. Great job, Shannon. Conservation Agent Jared Wilkinson was recognized as Missouri's SEAFL Wildlife Officer of the Year down in Hilton Head, South Carolina recently. And finally, of course, Conservation Agent Andy Barnes was selected for the Missouri State Employee Award of Distinction for the category of public service recently. So congratulations to that team. Questions? Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Bill White, Private Land Services Division Chief, and I've got a few things, some of historical importance for the private land effort in Missouri. Last month, we signed an agreement with MU Extension, and through that agreement, their livestock extension specialists will be hosting, organizing, and putting on native grass workshops aimed at grazers in our COAs, grassland COAs in western Missouri. This is something I've been waiting on for 32 years, and I'm sure there's people that waited 32 years prior to that for this to happen. We found out they've already had some workshops planned, and they've engaged our staff in doing that, I think all in the month of January. Also last month, we signed an agreement with the Missouri Corn and Soybean Associations to employ a cooperative position that would be more of an outreach specialist toward their membership across the state. And they're going to be focusing on promoting conservation of priority species like monarchs, native pollinators, and bobwhite quail, along with soil health and a myriad of other conservation efforts there. At the end of last month, we received word from NRCS. Karen mentioned RCPP. We had two of our original RCPPs that we've had, one in the igneous glades in southeast Missouri and one in the grassland COAs. We found out that those were both renewed. They'll bring in over $2.5 million in federal payments directly to landowners, and our match is a combination of mostly technical assistance, but also some financial assistance to those landowners. And it's unique because only 20% of the old RCPPs got renewed, and so we had two wildlife ones that went into that pot. And finally, we had a couple staff in Missouri receive national recognition through the MBCI's National State of the Bobwhite Report for 2019. They have set records as far as quail densities go for the state of Missouri, and they're also leading the nation in the number of quail they're finding in our quail restoration landscapes. No other state's been able to do this on private land, and we are, I think, Dave, are we one of 13 states involved in this effort so far? So, good things happening in private land in Missouri. Any questions for me? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Bruce Drucktraw, Acting Fisheries Division Chief. As is usual, this time of year, staff are wrapping up their field work, various sampling opportunities going on around the state. Part of that in the hatchery system is our annual catfish harvest at Chesapeake and Honeywell. We harvested 168,700 fish, moved them to 350 locations around the state in 4 days. So it's quite an effort, takes a lot of staff. Sarah was able to go down with us to one of the pre-harvest dinners, so that meant a lot to the staff. On the cold water side, trout season ended October 31st. This year we sold 386,373 daily tags to be exact. So pretty good year again this year, down slightly from last year, but not too far off. The cold water guys, they don't get to rest. Basically Halloween, then November 1st, we started moving fish to our urban and CAP partners. We moved 26,645 12-inch fish in 38 locations, and that just a couple days time there. And that is a wildly popular program. We're already hearing all sorts of compliments on that. Last but not least, you may have heard this before, but the Stream Team program is 30 years old this year. The Stream Teams United is hosting an event down at Echo Bluffs, November 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. It appears I chose not to write down the website, but if you'd like to go, you can still sign up and just get a hold of me or Sherry Fish or Chris Rigger, anybody in the Stream unit. Any questions? Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Allen, Forestry Division Chief, and I have a few items to report for Forestry Division. One thing that I would like to mention is that field staff are working very, very hard, not only on agency priorities like feral hog eradication and gearing up for chronic wasting disease and mandatory sampling, but this is when we enter into our forest inventory and timber sale marking season because the leaves are falling off, which makes that work a lot, probably a lot more productive to get out there and get that done. So we're gearing up for that, another winter season of marking and inventory. I might also mention that the nursery is getting very, very busy with orders rolling in like crazy for seedlings this year. And we will begin lifting seedlings just a little bit after December 1st. We'll be bringing on all of our hourly staff to start the lifting and grading processes and getting those trees ready to ship. So things are going well at the nursery this year. Want to mention some very good news out of Texas County. After hearing about the timber trespass and all the bad things that are going on there, I'm happy to say that tomorrow that a few of us will be traveling to both Houston and to Summersville to have a couple of ribbon cutting ceremonies for 2 brand new Fuels for Schools projects. So we're really excited about that. You'll remember that about 10 years ago that the department received a very large $6 million grant from the old ARA program, American Reinvestment and Recovery Act, under the Obama administration. And at that time, we were able to work with 6 rural schools in Missouri to put in woody biomass heating systems for their schools. So we're happy to announce that we've been able to continue that program at a smaller scale. And I've been working with some schools in South Central Missouri, the 2 I mentioned, Summersville and Houston, to put in some new projects. So those are completed, and I think Mike Hubbard and I and a few others are going to be traveling down there tomorrow to join with school officials and MDC when we will host some local citizens and also local people that are involved in local politics, national and regional, that will be there to participate in those ribbon cutting ceremonies. And I do want to mention, some people may say, why are we helping schools put in woody biomass heating systems? And there's several goals to that program. One of the goals, and probably the primary goal, is to help us to promote local markets for sustainable forestry and also for woody biomass by utilizing small diameter, low grade wood, and also utilizing woody residues that come from sawmills in the area. We can help support the local economy and also help support the local forest products industry by providing a source of some of their products. But it's also really good for the schools because the schools that put in these woody biomass heating systems usually, well, almost always are transitioning from a system where they're using a non-renewable energy source such as petroleum product, heating oil, or some other type of petroleum product. So we're helping those schools transition to a greener system that uses a renewable energy source in the form of wood. And then the sort of side benefit that happens with these projects is that wood costs a whole lot less than using petroleum products. And in addition, prices don't seem to vary much with wood like they do with other energy heating sources. So it's a win-win for the school. They save a lot of money by putting these systems in. They can teach their students about using renewable energy. And one school that participated in the program 10 years ago said with the money they saved, that was Ellington, from putting in these systems, they were able to hire another teacher. So it's sort of a win-win-win for schools, for students, for the forest products industry and the local economies. So that'll be tomorrow, Summersville Elementary and Houston High School. And then a couple other things I'll just mention real quickly. Just in the last 2 weeks, Forestry Division has worked hard to award 38 projects under the Tree Resource Improvement and Maintenance Grant Program. And those projects include communities who are implementing community forestry inventory programs, comprehensive management plans for their communities, education programs, staff training, pruning trees, removals, and yes, even planting trees under the TRIM program. So total MDC cost is just a little under $500,000, but that money is all matched. So it results in about $1 million of community forestry projects happening in 38 different communities this year. And in addition to that, we are also in the process right now of rolling out the hazard fuel mitigation grants. So we are working with local fire departments who are interested in applying for a grant to either host an open house in their community where residents can come and learn more about protecting their homes from catastrophic wildfire. They can also spend the money for doing individual home assessments in their community to help homeowners create defendable space around their homes. And then lastly, for community wildfire protection planning. So those grants are open now, and I wanted to put a plug in for that. So for field staff, if you know of a rural fire department that would be interested in any of these projects, they need to contact Ben Webster. And that would be it. Any questions for me? All right, thank you.
Good afternoon, Jason Sumners, Resource Science Division Chief. Just a couple quick updates. First, Resource Science has completed its project proposal review process. So as we begin to make budget deliberations on what stays in and what doesn't, we'll be engaging Outcome Champions. But it looks like hopefully we'll be able to accommodate most of the projects that got proposed this year. So we'll be following up with that. And yeah, in case you haven't noticed, this weekend, mandatory sampling. Hopefully the weather holds out. I mean, predictions in Southeast, maybe a little bit of rain. We'll keep our fingers crossed that everything looks better. It looks like it's going to be much warmer than it was last night and this morning, so that's encouraging. On a related note, I'd like to say a huge thank you to many of the folks here in Central Office and the folks in Central Region. As part of our lean process, we identified the data entry on the back end of collection of samples as being a huge gap between being able to deliver test results to our landowners or to our hunters and processors. So as part of that process, Diane Purcell and Alicia Struckoff, through their lean training, took on a process improvement process, which included saying, okay, let's set up a workstation in Columbia. Let's ask a bunch of people to volunteer and come in after opening weekend and set for 4 hours and do data entry. A few folks asked me, how in the world are we going to get people to sign up for that? What incentives do we need to create to make people to do that? And I was like, well, I don't know. Folks want to kick in, they want to help, you know. Just send it out and see what happens. And proud to say, staff stepped up. We filled nearly 80 spots on opening week or on the following week to help in terms of getting that data entered and us being able to turn samples around and get results back out to the hunters and to the processors. So a huge thank you to folks here and folks primarily in Central Region that stepped up and are going to help beyond opening weekend and help spread the workload that our CWD crew doesn't have to. So thanks.
Good afternoon, Sean Gruber filling in for O&E. Jeff had to step out for a moment. Last month, the commission approved merging two positions, outdoor skills specialists and education consultants. So we kind of got training underway for that. And last week we have everybody through archery training. So we have everybody except for a couple folks that had scheduled conflicts sorted through that. And in the next few months, we'll continue to kind of perfect that training schedule to get that sorted out as quick as possible. Also, if you want to listen to phones ring, come down to O&E and listen to the Hunter Education Bell. This time of year, it's going on, just a lot of calls, but I have to also mention it's much better this year. In the last few years with online hunter education has made it more manageable, so a lot of those calls are kind of dealt with online, so it's not as painful as it was a few years ago. Also have a RUNS volunteer that's scheduled to get a national award next month. Can't reveal any of the details right now, but if you have interest, next month, December 9th, at the monthly RUNS volunteer meeting, we'll award that there. Also, we have two staff at Missouri Way, Kathy Schulin and Chris Cloyd. And that's all I got unless somebody has questions. All right, thanks.
Good afternoon, Cindy Voss from Administrative Services. Just a few things from our division. Permit Services, along with other folks from other areas, will be staffing the Firearms Deer Season Call Center this Friday through Sunday. So should you be out at a CWD testing center and you need some assistance while working, they can contact us, this group, by calling 573-522-0107. I'm going to repeat that because I think that's going to be an important number. 573 522-0107. I know I was a greeter a couple years ago, and that was a very important connection that I had there with Nathan. So. Oh, yes, I didn't know if that was supposed to be top secret. So the governor is going to be coming to visit our call center on Friday. I believe he's supposed to be here between 9:15 and 9:45, so we're super excited about hosting him and letting him see what goes on at our call center. So, couple of things about budget. A reminder to staff that the budget timeline for your division getting it done is December 15th. Therefore, when you get an information request by your budget coordinators, please help them out with a quick turnaround. Also, fiscal notes will begin soon because legislators can pre-file bills starting December 1st. I know that Aaron recently sent out an email wanting us to update those contact lists, so just wanted to make a reminder for that. And then speaking of budget, Fleet Services will be sending out the request forms for fiscal year 21 vehicle, heavy equipment, ATV, and marine replacements, hopefully later this week. If there are no questions, I guess I'm it.
Yeah, right. So the forest, we continue to wait, not so patiently, for a decision from the U.S. Forest Service on closure of the Mark Twain to feral hog hunting. So we will hope that any day now, any moment now, we will get word that closure is going to occur. With that, everyone be safe out there this coming weekend, and thanks for all you do, team. Go get 'em.